And it is recording.
Oh, annoying.
How are you? Good. How are you? Good. What's your name? What's your Dan Sullivan? How's school going? Pretty well. About ready to what you're doing? Good. How about you? Give me like I'm just like a 6-year plan myself. Oh, Kelvin. My first 3 years, I had to work so I had to take some semesters off, get more money, get more semester in. Where do you live? Right. If you have any questions, get them in.
We are going to record this is a public relations
Okay.
Yeah, these are especially good.
I know.
What's your opinion on either? Because you think that they could do more in where they are now?
It's not the. I know.
Parnell has indicated, yes. I think that he's going to run for reelection. I think he's like 2014, so in order to run for Senate, they don't run for governor at the same time. So I gave up chocolate for the year. Like not voting for I don't think they can do it. Our poll did show that he held up different candidates. He said John Bratt, he would be the one.
No, I drink the cherry. See, that looks so other than something this guy.
You should change her name. Less market. Yeah, I gotta like where my work at, so I gotta not like Dude, I want one. I have the beaver seal hat and like the seal and some video. I really want to low-key match it. We seem to do it on he wears a full musk-on suit. Oh my gosh, every year he rocks a full musk-on suit and just walks the streets. So, super jealous.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. You go out there a lot. One day I'll get like 6 to 10 grand though. I tried on like a $14,000 water jacket, in fact, if there, depending on how many people, we have to put a couple tables together. Let's get more of a round table.
Chairs up front too.
But
We are giving up.
Yeah, they want to eat too, so that's fine. No. It's just, it was the childhood. Everybody get some food? You ready to start? Don't worry, don't just get going.
Hello, everybody. My name is Andrew Lessig. I'm the chairman of the Legislative Affairs Committee for the Student Government here at University of Alaska Anchorage. It is my privilege today to have Mayor Dan Sullivan here in charge of the municipality of Anchorage, where we all are right now. So without further ado, I believe he has some opening remarks.
Sure, thank you very much. Well, a couple of things. Thank you. This is a great annual event for me because this is old home school for me. Back after graduating high school at West High in 1969, I attended UAA for 69, 70, and 71. And during that time, UAA was simply 4 buildings on the west end of campus. The old cement buildings on the west end. It's just amazing to me how this institution has grown and the opportunities that it provides so many students now. So you're very, very fortunate. You're able to take part and learn in a university that is just growing leaps and bounds and is offering so much opportunity. So take advantage of it. I see Chancellor Case has joined us. Hi, Tom.
You're welcome.
So just a brief biography. I come from a family of 9 kids. I'm the 3rd oldest. I come from a family where being mayor is kind of in the genes, I guess. My grandmother was the first woman mayor in Alaska history. She was the mayor of Valdez in the 1930s, and then my father was the mayor here in Anchorage from 1967 to 1981. And so following in a good tradition and hopefully representing them well. When I first ran for office, I ran for office really on 4 basic things. I wanted to restore the fiscal health of the city. Coming into office in 2009, right after the big recession hit, obviously city finances, like a lot of places, were basically in a lot of jeopardy, and a lot of things had to be done to kind of restore our fiscal health. I also wanted to make sure that since public safety is job number 1 for any city government, that we really focused on trying to improve our crime numbers, and we'll talk about that a little bit. I know Max, I think, has a question about crime in Anchorage. Third thing was, after 40 years of enjoying the cheapest energy in the nation, as Cook Inlet proven reserves start to dwindle, we're now paying the most expensive gas prices in the nation. So part of my goal was to make sure that we have a long-term energy future for Anchorage that will allow us to grow and prosper. This city would not be the size it is or as prosperous it is today without having access to that cheap energy for 40 plus years. And then finally, I wanted to make sure that as we took in capital dollars from the bonds that we passed or from our state legislature, that we focused on maintaining the assets we have rather than going out and looking to build new structures and new facilities. We're blessed with very good public facilities here, but if you don't take care of them, you find yourself sooner or later replacing them. Some good maintenance is always good policy. So I always equate it, you probably don't build a deck on your house if your driveway's falling apart. So we've really focused on basic maintenance. And excuse me. And so far, I think we've done a really good job of accomplishing what we set out to do. On the fiscal health side, we have brought into city government performance measures where every department now has to identify what their goals are, how they're going to achieve them, but most importantly, at the end of each year, did they accomplish their goals? We measure now their performance, and all this is online in every department, so we can see whether or not your tax dollars are being spent wisely and efficiently. And so the other thing that we've done is we've really create a culture of thrift in city government where every department, it's typical in government that when you get a budget, you spend every dime of it so you can get more the next year. And we've really changed that thinking in city government that you don't have to spend every dime. If you're delivering the service you're supposed to deliver and doing it properly, and you have money left over at the end of the year, that's a good thing because we can either give that money back to the taxpayers or put it in reserve so we don't have to collect as much tax the next year. For 4 straight years now, we finished each year with unspent revenues, a surplus, and in government that very rarely happens, so we're real pleased about that. The other thing on the financial health side is because of the strong management that we put into place on running our city government finances, we've now had our bond ratings upgraded by the 2 major bond rating agencies. And after the recession, there's very few cities in America that got their bond rating upgraded, and it's a real plus for my finance team to have that happen. So on the finance end, I think we've done a good job. Public safety, Max, why don't you go ahead and lead off with your question on public safety, and I can tell some of the bigger story as well.
All right, my question has to do with the crime rate in Anchorage and the murder rate. And I was wondering what the municipality was doing to try and combat that and reduce the murder rates.
Yeah, very good. Well, actually, the murder rate is not up. In fact, the overall crime rate in Anchorage is on the decline and has been for 3 years. And I'm not equating that particularly because I've been in office 3 years. The crime is down 3 years, so although there is a new sheriff in town. But what we've done is when we first came into office, the first thing we did was we took a look at how is the police department structured. Are they deploying their resources in the most efficient manner to be most effective fighting crime? So what we did is we engaged a group called the Police Executive Research Forum, and they go city by city when they're asked to, and they're private organizations, so they get paid to do this, but they took a look at the structure of the Anchorage Police Department and made numerous strategic recommendations on how we can do a better job, particularly when it comes to community policing, which is what I wanted to go more towards, because having read many different articles and journals about how community policing can be effective, I thought we need to do it better here in Anchorage. And so what we've done is we've started to assign police officers in particular areas that is their beat every day, so they get to know the people in those neighborhoods, they get to know the business owners, they get to know the kids, they get to know who the troublemakers are. And by building that trust relationship, they get much more information and a free flow of good information, and it really helps them fighting crime. So what you've seen in Anchorage over the last 3 years is a reduction in crime in 5 of the 7 major crime categories. Murder is really not up. In fact, I think we had 16 murders last year, and it always ranges almost every year between about 14 and 20 murders. And so murder really isn't an increasing category at all. But the amazing statistic in terms of public safety is that we have fewer crimes reported today in Anchorage, Alaska than we did in 1981. And we've grown 70% since 1981. So we're almost double the size of the city, and yet we're reporting fewer crimes. And somebody said, well, gosh, maybe people just aren't reporting crime as much. And that is absolutely not true, because you have so many means now to report things. You've got your phones that not only can record a crime, take a picture of a crime, but instantly access numerous agencies to report a crime. So the ability to report is many times greater. So we're real pleased with what we've done in public safety. And again, the murder rate is not up. So questions? Yes.
Yes,
What's your name?
My name's Heidi.
Hi, Heidi.
And yes, Mayor Sullivan, sir. My question really isn't in this category, but I am interested to
Any
hear your
category is
thought.
good.
I am wondering what was on your mind and the council's at the time that you decided to do a land swap on the Anchorage Neighborhood Health Clinic, and it's a beautiful building and it has great resources and everything for the community, but why was not a transportation system into it thought of along with it so that it could be more convenient? Because at this time, yes, they run a shuttle from downtown, I'm aware of that, but it doesn't start till 10 a.m. and if you have an 8 a.m. appointment, you're either walking from Arctic and International up to it, or from C Street and Tudor down to it. And if you're on crutches or a wheelchair, that's all basically impossible.
That's a great question. Well, the answer is the Anchorage Neighborhood Health Clinic is a private institution. The city had absolutely no role in the land swap and moving it from Fairview. It's a private nonprofit organization. A local property owner, JL Properties, donated the property to the Neighborhood Health Center, which is why they chose that location, because the land was free. And then, of course, they did their private fundraising to build the facility. I agree 100%. I think when they moved it to that location, they should have looked at the transportation options and made sure that it was easily accessible. And we've been working with them. We said, look, we'll provide you the shuttle bus. I mean, we'll do whatever we can. But you're absolutely right. I think they missed the boat on that one. But again, it wasn't the municipality.
Right.
It wasn't our land swap. We really had very, very little to do with the whole thing. Yeah.
But I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we're gonna keep working to try and improve access to it, but we're even talking about rerouting a bus route. The only problem is the bus route that currently goes down Arctic is one of our most productive bus routes, and detouring it really throws a wrinkle into the system, but we're working it.
And bus 60, would that be a better option in that area, maybe?
I would ask my transit director about bus 60 because I'm not all that familiar with their exact schedule. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and so you were talking earlier about the budget and how each department doesn't spend all of its budget. I know that our city is somewhat in debt from past experiences before. So would that just go back to what we owe, the leftover,
Well, that's a good
to
question.
reduce the debt?
Yeah, actually, the city, a couple of things. Number one, every year the city budget has to balance. And so, you don't really have a big debt to take care of in the sense that your budget didn't balance and now you have to try and make up for it. But what we did have was there was several things on the books that had not been funded but needed to be taken care of. And so with the extra money that we saved at the end of the year, we were able to take some of those liabilities off the books. One of them was, you guys know where Glen Square is, where Old Navy used to be and everything? When they were building that, they actually moved some contaminated soil from that location to another piece of municipal property by mistake. Well, it took about $1 million to clean up that PCB-laden property that it got put onto. So with the extra money we saved at the end of the year, we were able to pay for that PCB cleanup. Same thing happened out at Kincaid Park. They were building all the nice soccer fields out there, and inadvertently, the contractor spread lead from the old biathlon range all over the soccer fields. Another $1 million cleanup. So with the money we've been saving, we've been able to actually take care of some of these liabilities that have been sitting on the books, including one, we had about a $3.5 million loan from our electric utility to purchase some properties, and that was sitting on the books unpaid. So what we've been doing is really taking care of, kind of what you said is correct. These, they're not traditional debts, but they are liabilities that were on the books, and we've been able to take care of them. So that's a good thing. And I think we just about got caught up. So that good management by my department heads has really been paying off. Yes.
My name is Wesley.
Yeah, no, I was just saying he'd be next. So.
And we're all hoping to graduate from here fairly soon and be looking for jobs. What do you figure is a living wage in this city? And does that include the opportunity to have and support a family and to advance in terms of education beyond maybe a bachelor's degree? What do you think we need to ask our employers to pay us when we're done?
Yeah, but there's so many different types of jobs, so many different lifestyles. I've got in my own life, I've lived very, very frugal existence at times, and then at a point in life where I can actually have a house where I can have 2 people over. So it's it just all depends. It'd be an impossible question to answer, but I will tell you this: that Anchorage is considered one of the top cities in the nation for jobs in general. Forbes last year named us the #1 city in America for jobs, and that's one of the beauties of our ability to recover from the recession of 2008, 2009 is we have such a diversified economy here. We've got a very active military base that employs lots of people. We've got the Port of Anchorage, where 85% of all the goods that come into the state pass through that port, another big employer with Tote and Horizon and all the contractors down there. The airport's the 4th largest cargo airport in the world. You've got native corporations that are billion-dollar companies now and working all over the world, but all that money comes back into Alaska because that's where they're headquartered. oil company headquarters, tourism market is active. So it'd be hard to answer your question specifically, but what I can say is that there's probably no better place in America right now for job opportunity. And then what you make of those job opportunities is all up to you, you know. You can get to the top of the ladder in Anchorage, Alaska if you work hard and got good ideas. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, my name is Miguel Ware. I serve on the Alaska Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee. Speaking of crime, my questions relate to this. The growing demographics of Sudanese immigrants in the city of Anchorage. What is your position on creating a liaison committee that includes the parents, the Anchorage School District, the police department, and law enforcement to help combat the continuous cycle of Sudanese youth going in and out of the law enforcement?
Well, that's a great question. You know, this is a challenge that we're facing in our city as we receive some immigrant populations. We've got Sudanese, we've got Hmong, we've got any number of populations that are increasing their numbers here in Anchorage. And it's a hard transition because in a lot of cases you're coming from both culturally and climate situations that are so radically different than what you find here in Alaska. So plus language barriers, you know, it's not an easy transition. And I know that there are groups working on it, and you know, I don't know if we need a super group, you know, of all the different players, but clearly we have to do a better job of helping transition. I know Catholic Social Services, this is one of their main missions. They've been the sponsors of a lot of the Sudanese population coming up here, and I know they do their best to do just what you said, try and make sure that people transition in and aren't in and out of institutions like McLaughlin. And, you know, make sure that as easy as possible, the first thing that needs to happen in any transition is, you know, becoming English learners and English readers and writers. It's so important as you move into a new culture to learn the language of that culture. Otherwise, the transition is so much more difficult.
Okay. Well, we're going to come back to our live audience here soon. We do have some questions that were posed in advance via Facebook or otherwise on the internet or before our event today. The first of which is one that actually somebody got to you right out here when you showed up, which is, right now, Senator Mark Begich is the first Democrat to represent Alaska since 1981 when Mike Gravel left the Senate, almost 30 years ago. He's coming up for his first re-election bid in 2014. Have you considered making a run against him?
Well, you know, it's funny because you find that in a job like mine, a job like the Chancellor's, you are so busy in your day-to-day job because it's a very, very busy job, and there's so many issues on my plate at any given time that are, in my mind, so very important that I, quite frankly, haven't really given it a whole lot of thought. Other people seem to be doing a lot of thinking of it for me, but in my case, I'm just a busy guy, and I want to do a great job being the mayor, and that's what I was elected to do. I took an oath of office to do it, and so right now it's not even on my horizon.
To follow up to that, it is a possibility, perhaps?
Well, you never say never. You know, in public service, one of the reasons that people get into public service is because you love where you live and you want to do the best you can to make it a great place and to give opportunities that we might have had growing up. So you never say never, but right now I'd say if I had to give odds, it'd be 90-10 against.
Okay. The next one that was posed to us is about something that actually happened last week. The American Civil Liberties Union is suing the city of Anchorage for the recent ban on sitting on the sidewalk, which was aimed at reducing panhandling. And they say it's a violation of the civil liberties of the people who are panhandling.
Well, actually, it's two separate laws. One, there is a panhandling ban in the downtown area, and in other areas of town, panhandling is allowed as long as you stay on the street corner. But where it becomes a violation is when you actually start walking into traffic to either solicit or collect a donation. It's not only against the law for the panhandler to be walking in traffic, it's actually against the law for the motorist to be luring somebody into traffic. It's a public safety issue. You don't want people, sometimes who are not in a very good state, sometimes in an impaired state, to be wandering in amongst traffic. Downtown, we based our law on the laws that are already on the books in Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Berkeley, some of the most progressive cities in America have this exact same ordinance. And so some people think, well, gosh, it's because that it's kind of a conservative versus liberal issue. But again, the most liberal cities in America have this law, and they have it for a very good reason. I don't know if anybody tracked what started happening downtown when one person sitting on a sidewalk turned into a cardboard box on a sidewalk, turned into 8 sleeping bags on a sidewalk. A sidewalk is designed for the free flow of pedestrian traffic, not for side camping, side sleeping, or side blocking. We don't have any problem with somebody sitting down eating a sandwich on a sidewalk. It's not designed for that. Our police officers know that. But when people start taking public space and turning it into their own private space, that's taking from everyone. It's the same thing in the parks. That's why we don't allow camping in the parks. Those are public spaces that belong to each and every one of us. You should never be fearful about going down a bike path or being in a park with your family and wondering who's in the bushes and what kind of condition they're in. It really becomes a public safety issue. So ACLU, they filed the suit, but quite frankly, the laws in these other jurisdictions have already been tested in court, and ours is much more narrow than a lot of them. I think it's a fairly frivolous lawsuit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next one is actually considered with partisanship in the elected sphere. The city of Anchorage has nonpartisan elections. You do not run as a Republican nor Democrat. You simply run as yourself. Do you believe this system has helped or hurt our city, and would you like to see it in place at the state or national level?
No, that's a great question. A lot of city governments are nonpartisan, and you're basically electing the person because you like their values, you like the ideas they have on how to improve the city. I think one of the lines that's been used a lot, and it's really apropos, is there's no such thing as a Democrat or Republican pothole. I mean, in city government, it's fairly basic. You want clean, safe, economically viable city, and I don't think those are partisan issues. I think when you get to the state and national level, you start getting a lot more into, in addition to some of the same sort of city issues of maintenance and economic development, but you get into more social issues as well, and I think that's where you start seeing the partisan divides come in, and why people want to elect people who represent a particular political party's philosophy over another one, because there's a lot more opportunity to deal with social issues at those levels than there is at the local level.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to do one more that was posed beforehand, and then we can go back to the people out in the audience. The last one is going to be actually one that was posed by our Vice Chancellor, Bruce Schultz. He's in charge of student academic affairs. He couldn't be here today to ask this himself, but he wanted me to ask you what you are doing to improve our young people's readiness to go to college here in the Anchorage School District in the Anchorage area. He wanted me to note that currently half of our incoming freshmen, over 50%, have to take zero-level classes, which are actually remedial high school classes, but they have to do this in order to move on because they have not yet been ready to take upper-level college math or college-level English.
That's a great question, and probably one that is a softball to me, because you may know that last year I conducted the Mayor's Education Summit, where I convened 100 of the leaders in Anchorage, education leaders, business leaders, people, principals, teachers, administrators, elected officials, and I brought in 7 leading experts from around the nation to talk about how the Anchorage School District rates compared to other districts and what we could do to become what was my goal, and that is I want to be the best school district in the nation. We've got outstanding facilities, we've got a good amount of money per student, in fact one of the highest in the nation, and we're not getting the results that we should be getting. So the summit convened, and it was really an amazing process. In fact, if anybody wants to see the 9-minute video that kind of summarizes the outcomes of the summit, you can go to muni.org/education summit, and the 9-minute video will give you the highlights of just how we rank and some of the goals that were established to move forward. And the 4 things that we set forward as goals was, number 1, if you look at other jurisdictions that are doing outstanding in the international world of education, the Singapores, the Finlands of the world, one of the things that they require is a master teacher in every classroom. I mean, when they define a master teacher, they're talking about a teacher that went through a much more rigorous curriculum and training and mentorship before they can even get into any classroom in their high schools. And so one of the outcomes was, how do we define what a master teacher is? How do we work with our leadership to produce master teachers? How do we attract high school students to get into the teaching profession, the best high school students? Because in America, I think it's not a secret that a lot of folks, that saying, if you can't do, you teach. And teaching degree has always been considered, maybe not the most rigorous of degrees. And that needs to change, and that's probably the number one thing. A master teacher, an outstanding teacher in any classroom is 90% of the difference. There was a thing in the video, and I hope you all do look it up, where one of the participants said, we all know the thought experiment where if you're in a school and you've got a mediocre teacher, but she's got all the bells and whistles, the computers, the whiteboards, this and that, and next door you've got a teacher with an empty classroom, but they're an outstanding teacher, every parent knows where they want their children to be. They want them to be with that outstanding teacher, regardless of the bells and whistles. So that's the key. The other outcomes where we need to offer more choice within the district. The schools that are hitting the highest marks are the Chugach Optionals, the Polaris, the ABC schools, and there's hundreds and hundreds of parents waiting to get into these programs. Well, if you're a business person like I am, and you've got hundreds of people waiting to use your product or buy your product or get into a program, you expand. You make sure that there's more opportunity. Some of the other things were that we need to raise the bar on what we consider to be proficient. Right now, the state of Alaska sets the 5th lowest bar in the nation on what we consider to be proficient in reading, writing, science, math, those different subjects. So the bar needs to be set much higher. International standards compared to the Alaska standards, it's really, it borders on ridiculous. So the good thing is the Anchorage School District has, after the summit, agreed to raise their standards to what's called the Common Core standards that I think 40-some states have adopted, which is a significant higher standard, which means that to be proficient in reading, you have to hit a higher level. To be proficient in math, you have to hit a higher level. And right now, again, we're the 5th lowest in the nation, and that's unacceptable. Then finally, the final outcome was that we need to keep the community involved in this discussion, because a lot of the data that was presented during the summit, nobody had ever heard this before. Nobody had ever informed the public that, oh, by the way, we've got these fancy new schools, but we're not doing so good. And so one of the goals going forward is to keep the community engaged in this, because change doesn't happen in education reform unless the community is truly involved and truly keeps the pressure on the school board, the superintendent, the state legislators who might pass education laws or funding, and so those were the 4 major outcomes. So I'm doing my best. It's typically not an area where mayors get involved. There is a school board and a superintendent, but quite frankly, around the country, mayors are getting much more involved in education because their constituents are demanding it, because they look at the cost and they look at the value they're receiving, and they're seeing a disconnect.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to transfer back to the live audience questions here. So, at your privilege, call on whoever you would like.
Sure. We'll start with the gentleman who had his hand up first, back over there.
My name is Arlo. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I was wondering what sort of progressive things Anchorage is doing or looking at doing to combat teen homelessness.
Yeah, absolutely. We have been very proactive on the issue of homelessness. When I came into office, my predecessor had established a 10-year plan on homelessness. We said we need a right now plan on homelessness. So we started embarking. What I did was, the first thing I did was I formed a homeless leadership team consisting of about 40 folks who represented different nonprofits in this community, all kind of nibbling at the issue of homelessness. And I wanted to find out what everybody was doing so that we weren't duplicating efforts and wasting money and getting everybody under that one tent, so we could truly put together a plan that would be effective in dealing with the problem. First thing we did was, as I mentioned earlier under public safety, we approached a lot of it as a public safety issue, because when you're homeless and you're, for example, camping in a park, not only, as I mentioned, is it a danger to those of us that want to use those facilities, but the violence within those camps itself, because of the drinking and the rapes, the beatings, it just, you don't want that population. They're already vulnerable, having to suffer through violent crimes. And there were starting to be more and more incidents of people not in the camping situation, but inflicting violent acts upon those people. So from the public safety standpoint, it rose right to the top of the list, because public safety is job number 1. So we've done about 3 or 4 key things. First thing we did was, we knew that Brother Francis Shelter, for example, oftentimes reaches capacity, and we needed more places for people to go on cold nights when they were homeless. So we established what we call the cold weather plan. We now have, I think, 7 institutions, churches and other places that have offered to open their doors when it gets below 40 degrees at night. And they had to be certified first. We had to make sure they had sufficient beds, exits, fire suppression systems, bathroom facilities. And so now we've expanded the ability of folks who are homeless on a given night to hundreds and hundreds of more bed opportunities. And that's been very effective. And in those situations, though, they're not dealing with the chronic inebriates, they're dealing with displaced moms and kids and those sort of things. The second thing we did was, and you're probably very familiar with the Carlick Manor, we knew that while we want people to get treatment and not be homeless because of an addiction, that there are some folks that, despite all the different treatments, are just incorrigible. And so Carlick Manor was established. And this is a private institution, again. It wasn't city money, but we were, I think, part of the effort to make sure that these people, the ones that are in Carlick Manor today, are the ones that are dying in the alleys, dying in dumpsters, dying in Little League dugouts because their chronic addiction got so bad that basically they would leave themselves vulnerable by sleeping overnight in the middle of winter and stuff and dying in our streets. Well, no modern society wants people dying in their streets, so Carlick Manor was another thing we did. The other thing we did is we get federal money from Housing and Urban Development for different projects that increase home opportunities, either temporary or permanent. And on the temporary side, we just awarded a $750,000 grant to Catholic Social Services. They run a facility called Clare House. And Clare House is for moms and kids who are displaced either economically or for whatever reason. And so Clare House purchased a motel on Spinard Road, the Eagles Nest Motel, remodeling it, and it'll add, I think, 100 plus units to take care of temporarily displaced moms and kids. And then on the real cure to homelessness is a home. And so what we're working with Cook Inlet Housing, we're working with Rural Cap, NeighborWorks, Volunteers for America, and we're trying to make sure that grant money goes into affordable housing. And 2 things just happened recently, too, adding to the housing stock at an affordable level, which really makes a difference. The Howard Johnson's downtown, which used to be the Holiday Inn, and the Inlet Towers over on L Street, both have converted to apartments, very small but very livable apartments. So that's added hundreds of units to the lower priced housing stock. So those are the things we're working on. Yes? No, okay.
Sorry, building off of that question.
What's your name?
My name's Lydia. So building off of the question that was just asked, and I believe he was speaking specifically of teen homelessness, and I know that from talking to teens who become homeless, that a lot of that comes from teens in the foster care system. So I wonder if there's anything that you're doing or anyone under you is doing to reform the foster care system so that kids cycling out aren't becoming homeless right after they get out.
Sure. Well, one of the things we've done, of course, we've been great supporters of Covenant House. And as you know, Covenant House deals with that population. In addition to the grants we've given to Clare House and others, we've given major grants to Covenant House. They're building their new facility near downtown, and they're going to be able to greatly expand their ability to take homeless teens who might be cycling out of foster care. Foster care is not a city function. It's a state and federal function. We certainly encourage the state at all times to make sure that they do what they can do to promote a good, strong, and effective foster care system, but it really does not fall under my direct bailiwick. So what we can do is certainly be supportive and help groups like Covenant House that do deal with homeless teens. So that's probably where we're most effective in that area. Anyone back there?
Hi, my name's Brandon, and I really enjoyed or like the idea of having master teachers in each classroom. I just hope part of the criteria is they're a master marksman. That might be helpful. But my question is basically, I've been going to a lot of these Title 21 meetings, and my question is in regards to the public safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. I personally like to walk, and I love my bikes, and I can't do anything during the winter. I just rode my bike yesterday and nearly thought I was going to die. I was wondering, I mean, there's a lot of mention of cleaning the streets up. That's going to cost a lot more money. Us as citizens getting out cleaning the streets or just buying different bikes that are able to ride on the snow. But what, aside from Title 21, because I know that has a lot of answers in it and a lot of questions also, but is the city itself doing anything to try to maintain roads for us to be able to ride and walk during the winter months?
Well, sure. I mean, our maintenance department, I think does despite very, very challenging conditions. I mean, we are a northern city, and but our street crew, they're committed to roads being cleared all over town after at least a 4-inch snowfall within 72 hours. We're plowing many, many more trails than we ever used to plow. I mean, it's probably doubled over the last 5-6 years. We particularly focus on routes to school so that the elementary kids and junior high kids can get to school, walk to school. And we do see any number of bike commuters, and they do have the big fat tire bikes, and they're cruising down the streets pretty good. But I think a year or two ago, the municipality adopted the bike plan. And the bike plan has all sorts of strategies in it to make sure that those bike commuters can do so safely. All new roads that we build either have a dedicated bike lane or, in almost all cases, a trail on one side and a sidewalk on the other side. And then, of course, the challenge is to keep one or the other clear, and that's not always easy when you get consecutive snowfalls and stuff. But the bike plan really is a good path forward for making sure that as we see a growing number of bicycle commuters or just bike recreationalists, that we can accommodate them and make their journey safe. We're trying. Wait for the mic.
Hello, Elizabeth again. Moving on the question about education, where you say you want to raise the education levels in high school. Does that include the education levels in junior high and elementary too? So I think it all starts at elementary, and I think the level there is, they're not as up and up as other states in the lower 48.
Yeah, no, it refers to all grades. In fact, if you look at the Education Summit video, you'll see that one of the presenters, Katie Haycock, who's the president of the National Education Trust, she speaks to, for example, statewide, our 4th grade reading scores compared to national reading scores. We're last in the nation. 8th grade math compared to national 8th grade math. The state of Alaska ranks last in the nation. And so, it covers all grades, not just high school. And in some cases, we do see actually an improvement as we get into high school in some of these statistics, but it is such a challenge because we're lagging way behind, and it's just one of my passions because we have the resources to do so much better. We just need to demand it of our education system.
Thank you.
Who hasn't asked a question? We'll start back over here.
Hello, my name is Omal Safi, and I'm an international student from Afghanistan. And I was wondering, this is out of the topic, my question. It's about the sister city. I'm really interested, and I talked to my folks back home, my friends, everybody. I was here in 2009 in the school year, went to East High as an exchange student. And I thought it was a great experience for me when I went back home. And I shared my experience with all my friends and stuff. They were very excited about it. And right now I'm trying to, I think everybody knows about the sister city, and it has a lot of great opportunities, like Americans go to Afghanistan or other sister cities, and then come here, learn from the cultures and share with each other, education-wise or any tourism, everything. And my question is, what are the specific things that you're looking through the sister city relationship?
Well, I think a couple of things. As he mentioned, we have a sister city commission. We currently have 6 sister cities. We've got Tromsø, Norway. We've got Magadan, Russia. We've got Darwin, Australia. Chitose, Japan. We've got Incheon, Korea. And Whitby, England are our 6 sister cities. And the commission works to facilitate exchanges, student exchanges, sometimes sports teams exchanges, sometimes cultural and art exchanges. And one of the challenges, as we talked before the forum here today, is that it's a volunteer commission. We really don't have a whole lot of funding, and so they're hesitant to expand the sister city relationships right now because they don't feel, quite frankly, we're doing as good a job as we should be doing with the ones we have already. Now, I mentioned to you that we might be looking at another option on how to manage our sister cities, and we've got a meeting tonight on that very subject, as I mentioned, so keep in touch on it. One of the things that was the criteria, though, you mentioned was it helps to have an active population here in Anchorage that promotes the sister city relationship. Whether in our case right now, we have a fairly large Russian population. We've got a large English population, primarily through the oil companies because they have an awful lot of Brits working for them. We share commonality with Norway because we're both oil producing jurisdictions. Just so that's been one of the criteria is there already commonality within their populations that are kind of asking for more exchange.
Why I was really interested when I heard about the CCC was because 2014 the U.S. troops will pull out, and they've been trying to establish this relation since 2001. And I thought this would be, because this goes through your office and it's a great program, I thought it would be the best idea to establish this relation, long-term relation. That's got my attention.
No, and I appreciate that. I think you make a good point. After such a large and sometimes this ambiguous presence there, what will be our role going forward, and how can we make it a positive relationship, and whether or not Alaska is, a place to establish that joint relationship. One of the things, so the term establishing a relationship always has a dollar something behind it, because to establish a relationship there has to be travel back and forth, and that's where the rub comes, is that right now the commission really just does not have the funds to hardly travel, yet less expand the relationship. So I'm not saying it can't, I'm just saying it's going to be a challenge to somehow find a way to make this commission more viable and get them the funding, because to travel to Japan, travel to Afghanistan, and truly have those kind of exchanges, it has to be people meeting people, and that does take resources.
Going back to education, one of the things that you obviously tried to do is raise performance levels in terms of testing scores. And my question is whether you think that teachers within the school district need to be focusing in on the tests when they're in class or not, because it's been my experience. I graduated from Solaris School of Development, which has done very well in terms of graduation rates and tests. But what I found was that in the classroom itself, teachers didn't tend to focus on the tests. So I guess kind of where should teachers be putting their focus if they want to use test scores?
And that really is not a question probably for me to answer. I'm not trying to micromanage what happens within a classroom. I'm looking at the bigger picture of structurally, how do we get to a point where we're emulating the best education systems in the world? And so I'm keeping mine a little bit broader. Raise the bar, get great teachers in every classroom, keep the community involved in this education business, and offer more choices. And then how it's actually delivered within the classroom, there's education experts that might debate anything I say. But one of the things I will say is that in Finland, for example, one of the things they do is they really focus on hands-on learning. For example, if you're going to learn geometry, you build something, and you measure it while you're building it, because anything you build has geometry in it. So, that kind of focus has held them very well. They've been #1 in the world in educational performance for decades plus. And they decided about 30-some years ago, they were, as a whole country, they decided that since they weren't strategically located, they didn't have the oil resources of their neighbors, Norway, that their #1 resource would be their human resource. And as a country, this is an amazing thing that happened. They changed the culture of an entire country. They decided that we will do things different in how we educate our people. And so they embarked on this grand experiment, and they didn't take international tests for a long, long time. And the grand experiment was great teachers, hands-on learning, and then when they finally, a decade later, decided to take the PISA, the International Standards Test, they knocked it off the charts. And so there's a number of ways to get there. You look at Korea, for example, they do it differently. It's much more book learning, it's much more test-oriented. So there's more than one way to get there, and I'm not so sure I have the right answer to that.
Do you think that that to have great teachers you need more funding? I guess budget-wise, do you think that the school district is receiving the budgeting that it needs, or not?
Sure. Right now we spend more per capita on students in Anchorage than just about anywhere in the nation, so there's plenty of money. The question really becomes, are you spending the money in the most effective manner? So it's similar to what we did in city government. It's not how much money you have, it's how effectively you spend it. And so one of the things in the school district that I think the public would be more than willing to accept is if they knew that they would get much stronger performance by having great teachers in every classroom, I think the public would support it monetarily as well as philosophically, because who doesn't want that great outcome? There's nothing more important, I think anybody will say, than having an educated population, whether it's to go into vocational training or in college path. And so I think the public would support if it meant paying master teachers more. I know I would support it. If the outcomes follow, it's worth it.
Okay. We have time for one more question until your time with us is up. We'd love to have more, maybe some other time. So, Mr. Bullard.
You're on, Max. Max is an intern in my office, by the way, so he's got all this inside knowledge. He asks trick questions with.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. How's it going?
Very well, sir.
Okay. Last week, I was privileged to attend the Alaska Economic Development Center's annual luncheon, where keynote speaker Richard Florida constructed an evaluation of Anchorage, how it's doing on all its different levels. And one of the levels that he rated poorly for the city is technology. And I was wondering what the municipality's plan is to increase our economy's technology aspect.
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't recall him rating us poorly in that. They say Anchorage is one of the most wired cities in America. We've got more people online per capita than I think just about anywhere. I think what we lack, though, is we're certainly in all of our different commerce areas, technology is not a strong suit. We're not Silicon Valley. We're not the Golden Triangle in North Carolina. We're remote, and I think a lot of times technology firms look at us as not a place to particularly set up a business. But I will say, though, that I think nowadays people are realizing that you don't have to be in a certain location to be a high technology center, and that's what technology is all about. You can communicate, you can relay information, you can do your job from just about anywhere now. So, from the city standpoint, we're utilizing virtually every tool in the technology quiver because we've gone online with so many processes now that you don't have to stand in line. That's kind of our motto is you can do things online so you don't have to stand in line. And we're trying to get into literally the paperless world in city government. One of the things we've done is we've instituted electronic time cards. Well, the private sector, a lot of institutions have done this a long time ago, but the city was still pushing tons of paper, filling out manual time cards every day, going now to all electronic time cards so that there's not these payroll slips floating all over the city. So we're looking at my IT department, my finance department, they're working virtually every day to become a paperless entity. And so I think we're adopting good technology. The other things we're looking at is whether or not some of these things can be outsourced and done more efficiently now that the cloud exists, right? That there's companies out there that could do a lot of the functions that the city might do and do them more effectively. So we're looking at those opportunities too.
Do you have any closing remarks or anything you'd like to say?
No, just thank you very much for inviting me. And again, I spent 3 years on this campus back when it was just a little tiny campus, and just so impressed with how this institution has grown. And Chancellor Case and his team are doing a great job. Very, very excited. It seems like about every year a new building goes up, offering more opportunity for students, and I just think that's a beautiful thing. As a city, I want to always be a good partner. We've worked very well with the Chancellor and his team, and we're going to continue to work together. We want to make sure that this becomes more and more recognized as a great place to get an education. Thanks.
Okay. Before you go, Mr. Mayor, we also have a small gift. Thank you for coming today. So, since I found out you're not a big fan of candy, and since you noted when you showed up today you're on a diet, I have this wonderful gift from the Alaska Sausage Company to present to you.
We have a weight loss challenge in my office, and I think I'm losing. This will help.
Weight loss challenge in the office.
Thanks, good questions. What are you studying?
I'm studying history.
Oh, very good.
Political science.
I was a political science major.
Yeah.
So what after that, law school, or come to work for the city?
Would you say I'm not all bossy?
No, I said it went off.
Okay.